Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, controversy over a body cam arrest and death. Did deputies go too far? Questions and answers facing a review board as the public sounds off. Plus, a new plan to build more housing, and wait until you hear where local officials want to place it. And why dogs may be more than our best friends. They may even be able to prolong our lives. KPBS Evening Edition starts now. Good evening. It's Tuesday, October 8th. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. In just a few minutes, a controversial issue is about to go before the public and a review board. At issue, the death of a man who died following a struggle with law enforcement. KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman is live now at the County Administration Building with more on this case and the family's quest for justice. Matt?
Yeah, Maya, that review board is going to be looking over their investigators' findings that a deputy acted improperly by pulling McNeil's shirt over his face that may have contributed to his death. National City police officers arrested McNeil in June of 2018 and found that he had a knife and meth on him. Review board investigators say after arresting him, officers used a spit hood on his head, which is used to keep suspects from spitting or biting officers. Now, after arriving at the San Diego Central Jail, investigators say officers placed another spit hood on McNeil, but deputies said it had little effect. Then a deputy pulled McNeil's shirt over his head as an additional shield. The review board investigators found that violated the sheriff's use of force guidelines, which says a person's mouth and/or nose shall never be obstructed. The county medical examiner said McNeil died due to a lack of oxygen to the brain, which could have been caused by meth intoxication, his struggle with officers, respiratory compromise, or a combination of all three. McNeil's family is suing the officers involved in the death. Their attorneys say these citizens' reviews of in-custody deaths are key.
Public involvement in the review board process is essential if you want the system to change. If you want transformational change in how law enforcement polices your communities, you have to show up when there's a question of whether or not police officers, sheriff's deputies acted appropriately.
District Attorney Summer Stephan cleared all the officers and deputies from criminal liability following McNeil's death. Now, in regards to the clear preliminary finding, the Sheriff's Department issued a statement to KPBS saying in part that it does not see enough evidence to support the finding that McNeil's shirt was used in a way that affected his breathing. Now, that deputy involved has since retired from the department. CLERB has also full recommendations for the Sheriff's Department. They include developing a policy to train deputies on the use of protective equipment, how to inspect spit hoods, and prohibiting deputies from adding additional items over those spit hoods to prevent inmates from breathing. Now, that board is going to be having this meeting in less than half an hour, just a few minutes, to discuss the findings where they will vote whether or not to accept them. Maya?
Thanks, Matt. That's some dramatic video there. Where does the process go from here?
Yeah, so basically tonight, before they vote on this, there's going to be public comment. So the public will have a chance to sound off, say what they think about the report. Then the board, which is comprised of 11 members, they're going to go into a closed session. They're going to review all the documents involved. Then they're going to vote. Now, to accept the report, they have to vote a majority vote. So that's 6 votes. And if they accept the report, then that means that they think that the deputy did act improperly and violate sheriff's policy guidelines. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
More housing, easier commutes to work. Many in our county want just that. And today, a local congressman laid out a plan to combine the two. KPBS reporter Priya Sridhar has more.
The Build More Housing Near Transit Act would require applicants interested in federal transit funds to prove that housing would be located near proposed transit stops. The federal money comes from the New Starts program, which funds transit projects like the commuter rail and the Midcoast Trolley. Congressman Scott Peters says this bill will help address San Diego's housing shortage and help the environment.
They should be asking, what are you doing to build housing near it? To make sure that we get ridership, that we get people out of their cars, that federal taxpayers get their money's worth, and that we get the environmental benefits of transportation.
County Supervisor Nathan Fletcher supports the bill and says it will help reduce the cost of living for San Diego residents.
It will also help with the location of housing, and if we put that housing along transportation corridors that can get you from where you live to where you work, that's time you don't have to spend away from your family. That's gas you don't have to put in your car. That's greenhouse gas and toxic air pollution you don't have to emit.
Congressman Peters has recently been criticized by climate activists for not supporting the Green New Deal, a plan to slash the nation's carbon emissions. Priya Sridhar, KPBS News.
Governor Newsom is taking aim at excessive rent increases. Today, he signed a bill that limits rent hikes to 5% each year, plus inflation, until January 1st of 2030. It also bans landlords from evicting tenants for no reason, meaning they can't kick people out just to raise the rent. The new law, though, does not apply to housing built within the last 15 years, a provision meant to encourage developers to build more in a state desperately needing housing. It also does not cover 2 million Californians who already have rent control. Despite a year marked by the highest volume of migrant detainment in the U.S. in more than a decade, the number of apprehensions at the southern border continues to decline. But U.S. Customs and Border Patrol says its work is far from over.
CBP's enforcement actions on our southwest border totaled nearly 1 million in fiscal year 2019.
The Trump administration says the amount of migrants previously arriving at the border were unprecedented, leading to a surge in U.S.-Mexico border arrests, an 88% increase from 2018. But those numbers are on the decline for the fourth month in a row. Mark Morgan, the acting Customs and Border Protection Commissioner, held a press conference today at the White House to discuss the data.
These numbers are numbers that no immigration system in the world is designed to handle, including ours. Arrivals from families to the border in fiscal year 2019 more than tripled any previous fiscal year on record.
And the influx of border crossings was not one the nation was prepared for.
Our Border Patrol facilities, we've talked about this, were not designed to hold families or children. They were designed as police stations. And because of that, because of the new demographic of families and children, those resources became strained, and our limited resources had to be diverted from their law enforcement duties securing the border to address the humanitarian crisis.
Curbing immigration has been President Trump's signature issue, but the numbers had risen dramatically under his watch. But the White House says its policies provide results.
Just 4 short months ago, our daily apprehensions were close to 5,000. And today, I just looked at it on my screen before I left my office, it's below 1,700. We went from over 19,000 people in custody just 4 short months ago to less than 4,000.
Those policies have included denying asylum to most migrants who crossed through another country and sending more than 45,000 migrants back to Mexico to wait out their asylum claims.
We have essentially ended catch and release. If you come to our borders now with a child, it's no longer an immediate passport into the interior of the United States. Instead, they will be afforded a lawful and expedited process, but they will not be released into the interior United States, never to be heard from again. While this demonstrates an incredible effort, especially by the men and women of CBP, there is more to do.
And a majority of immigrants coming to the U.S. are Central American families who turn themselves in after crossing the border and are fleeing violence and poverty. Many seek asylum. A new political battle is brewing on Capitol Hill tonight as the White House declares it will not participate in what it's calling the Democrats' illegitimate impeachment probe. Also tonight, a key witness in the House Impeachment Inquiry is being blocked from testifying before a joint House committee. Camilla Bernal explains why.
The failure to produce this witness, the failure to produce these documents, we consider yet additional strong evidence of obstruction of the constitutional functions of Congress.
House Democrats furious that U.S. Ambassador to the European Union, Gordon Sondland, was blocked from testifying today on Capitol Hill.
They have done everything they possibly can to obstruct the Congress's constitutional right to oversight.
This is part of the Democrats' impeachment inquiry into President Trump and follows a whistleblower's complaint about a call Trump had with the Ukrainian president in July. Sondland was expected to testify about conversations he had that discussed whether President Trump withheld aid from Ukraine while pushing Ukraine for an investigation into Joe and Hunter Biden. For their part, Republicans said they too had been looking forward to hearing from Sondland, but stood by the White House decision to block the testimony, saying the impeachment inquiry process hasn't been fair.
We wish he would have been able to testify too, but we fully understand why the administration made the decision they did.
A new poll shows that public opinion may be shifting. For the first time, a majority of Americans supporting the impeachment inquiry process, with 58% agreeing that Congress was right to open the impeachment inquiry, and 38% opposed. In Washington, I'm Camila Bernal reporting.
The chairs of the House Intelligence, Foreign Affairs, and Oversight Committees said they will be issuing a subpoena to Ambassador Sondland for both his testimony and documents. The Supreme Court began hearing 3 cases on whether it is legal to fire workers based on their sexual orientation or gender identity today. Dozens gathered outside of the High Court this morning to show support for gay rights. The Supreme Court decision could end with a historic ruling for LGBTQ rights. 4 years ago, the court ruled same-sex couples across the nation are legally allowed to marry. However, it is still legal to fire someone for being gay in many states. The justices will consider arguments that laws banning workplace discrimination based on sex should also include gender identity. California's destructive wildfires are hurting the state's ability to hit greenhouse gas reduction goals. KPBS environment reporter Eric Anderson says severe wildfires wipe out savings the state is making.
A new report by the nonpartisan think tank Next 10 finds wildfires were responsible for putting massive amounts of carbon dioxide into the air in 2018. In fact, the study finds those fires put 9 times more carbon dioxide into the air than what the state saved with its aggressive climate change goals. Next 10 founder Noel Perry says that puts pressure on state officials to do more.
We've got to really be creative at this point in our history and really hunker down and come up with some new solutions that can really address these climate challenges, because we've set some very, very ambitious goals for ourselves.
The report says a warming climate increases the risk of wildfires, and that hurts the state's ability to slow climate change. The study recommends more aggressive policies, which would triple the amount of greenhouse gases the state is trying to reduce. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
Had enough of high gas prices? Well, experts expect prices to stabilize by the end of the week. The state average right now is at $4.18 a gallon for regular unleaded, but some stations are as high as $5. As we've been reporting, the spike is due to outages at several refineries that supply gas to the West Coast. Many of those refineries often suspend operations this time of year as they switch from summer to winter blends, but these outages were unexpected. And by the way, the average price across the country is $2.65. It's fire season year-round in San Diego, but the fall has some of the most dangerous months. Right now, we are dealing with warm and dry weather, which adds to wildfire risks. But for how long? Meteorologist Erin Calandra has our forecast.
Well, we certainly did have a lot of sunshine today. It's because of a high-pressure system out to the east of us. It's giving us an offshore flow, so fewer clouds, more sunshine, and it is warmer. It's going to last for another day or so, and then we'll see the return of our normal pattern. But for now, clear skies all across the county. Now, the winds are also kicking up. It's going to be breezy along the coast and gusty in those mountains and passes. So both hands on the steering wheel. It's also increasing our fire danger, so be careful out there. 60 degrees for the low tonight. You might see perhaps a light cloud or two, but mostly clear. In Ramona, 45 degrees. El Cajon at 56, and Chula Vista, 58 for the low. Borrego Springs down to a comfortable 66 degrees. Tomorrow, up to 93. It's going to be sunny and bright. San Diego at 72 and El Cajon coming in at 80. Oceanside, sunshine with perhaps a light cloud or two moving in at 74 degrees. Wednesday through Friday, again, this high pressure system is strong. You'll notice the winds kicking up. Certainly something that everyone will notice. With that sunshine, it will be warmer, but also gusty, and that's going to be the pattern really through the rest of the week with that high pressure system dominating. So here we are along the coast. We get up to 80 on Thursday, all the way up to 84 Friday, and then for the weekend, we get a break. Temperatures slowly drop by Sunday. We're talking the upper 70s, and it's going to remain nice and sunny. Inland, we have some fog around Wednesday and Thursday, but then lots of sunshine. Temperatures will be in the 80s, getting up to 88 degrees by Saturday, the warmest day of the week, and it's going to remain sunny and warm on Sunday in the mid-80s. In the mountains, boy, you'll feel the wind. It's going to be breezy Wednesday, Thursday, and then just windy on Friday. 62 for the temperature. The weekend will be not as windy, sunny and in the 60s. And in the deserts, it's also going to be breezy. 93 Wednesday, and then it cools down to the upper 80s, staying nice and sunny. For KPBS News, I'm Erin Calandra. Back to you.
Some alarming statistics from health officials. 3 types of sexually transmitted diseases are at an all-time high in the United States. Gonorrhea, chlamydia, and syphilis cases have risen for the 5th straight year. That's according to the CDC. More than 2 million people were diagnosed last year. The combined number marks the most cases ever recorded since monitoring began. Possible factors driving the rise in STD cases include a surge in people getting tested and cases being diagnosed and reported. Officials say there's also a decline in people using condoms. Walgreens will no longer sell e-cigarettes. The retail pharmacy chain announced today it will stop selling the products amid, quote, developing regulations in a number of states and municipalities. The laws come as governments struggle with questions of how to regulate vape products after several deaths have been blamed on them. Walmart made a similar announcement last month. Walgreens will continue to sell traditional cigarettes. Too much exercise could keep you from making good choices. That's according to a new study that focuses on how overworking your body could interfere with your brain. Andy Rose has more in today's Health Minute.
The brain's capacity for exertion is limited. Simply put, over-exercising the body could lead to brain burnout. That's according to a study in the journal Current Biology. A group of elite endurance athletes was asked to overtrain for 3 out of 9 weeks. Researchers then compared them to a group who had been training normally. The overworked athletes didn't do as well as their counterparts on a cycling test, and MRI scans showed more fatigue in the cognitive control part of the brain. The findings show a link between overexertion and the inability to resist the temptation of immediate gratification. Athletes were asked if they'd prefer $10 now or $50 in 6 months. Those who overtrained were more likely to take the $10 now. But experts point out the study only looks at endurance athletes, not regular people. Prior research shows about 4 to 5 hours of exercise each week can have positive effects on cognitive function, meaning the average Joe shouldn't worry about brain burnout. For today's Health Minute, I'm Andy Rose.
National University is expanding with the help of a historic $350 million donation from local philanthropist Denny Sanford. The university announced today it will also be renamed Sanford National University after its benefactor. National University serves mostly adult learners and hopes to double its student body and cut tuition costs in half over the next 5 years. Sanford attended the big announcement at the university's La Jolla campus.
The plan right now is to at least double the size of the university. We're currently 45,000 students, and we're going to over 100,000 for sure.
Tuition at National University currently costs more than $13,000 a year. The renaming goes into effect on July 1st of 2020. A new exhibit at the Coronado Museum is focusing on the families of prisoners of war and troops who are missing in action. KPBS military reporter Steve Walsh says it all started with a local group of military wives during the Vietnam War.
Sid Stockdale was 11 years old when his father, James Stockdale, became one of the first American pilots shot down over North Vietnam. Now their family table from their home on Coronado is the centerpiece of a new exhibit.
This is the table, the dining room table around which the wives of prisoners and missing first gathered on October the 7th, 1966.
His father was 40 when he was shot down and taken prisoner. As the wife of the highest-ranking officer, his mom, Sybil Stockdale, took it upon herself to begin organizing the growing number of wives who were in the same situation.
They began to ask each other what they should do, and that, over time, evolved into regular gatherings at our family house of this group of women that gave birth eventually to the League of Families of POW MIA in Southeast Asia, which became a nationwide movement.
The movement sprung up organically at bases around the country. Karen Olson Butler was at Naval Air Station Lemoore near Fresno when her husband was shot down in 1965.
And he was considered missing in action, but there was an inference that he probably was killed in action. I found out he was alive 5 weeks later on the Today Show. And a friend had called me and said that they had just announced that he was a prisoner of war. This was before the Navy had an opportunity to even know and inform me.
The group may be best known for eventually creating the black and white POW MIA flag that would become possibly the most enduring symbol of the Vietnam War. But that was years later in 1972. For the first several years, the wives were told to keep quiet, says author Heath Lee.
This was a situation that the government and the military wanted wives and families to say little to nothing about, except for close family members. And there was some merit to that in previous wars where the prisoners weren't held that long. People feared it would derail negotiations. Now, Vietnam, prisoners were held up to 8 years. And this was a totally different war.
Lee curated the exhibit, which is now at the Coronado Museum, based on her book, League of Wives. It chronicles the growth of the National League of POW MIA families from small gatherings to a national movement. Sybil Stockdale was the first wife to go public about the treatment of prisoners in an article that ran in the San Diego Union in 1968. Lee says, at first the response was muted, but they kept finding ways to get themselves into the headlines.
John McCain, who I interviewed in 2016, said it was like a light switch going off in 1969. And he said the torture stopped. He was moved from solitary to a room with 25 other prisoners. And it was due, one, to Ho Chi Minh's death, which definitely helped the communist leader. But he said these women and the awareness that they raised in the international community.
He told her that made all the difference. Their story is part spy novel. Early on, the Navy showed the wives how to write letters to their husbands in code. Later, it's mostly the story of this national movement, a rare moment of unity in a divisive war, driven largely by these women. Sybil died in 2015. Walking through the exhibit, her son Sid was struck by a cluster of bracelets with the names of a POW, which was part of a campaign to connect with the public.
Everyone mailed their bracelet to the returned POW with a note. It was just amazing. When we went into my mother's attic, we found there was a cardboard box like this. It's just full of all these bracelets.
Author Heath Lee originally curated the exhibit for the Robert J. Dole Institute of Politics in Kansas. Since 2017, it's been traveling the country. The exhibit was reimagined for the Coronado Museum to emphasize the local history. It's now open to the public. Steve Walsh, KPBS News.
Woodruff tonight on the NewsHour. The White House blocks a key player in the Ukraine affair from appearing before lawmakers. Coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
And this may be no surprise to some, but dogs could add years to your life, and that's according to new research from the University of Toronto. Researchers analyzed data from 4 million people in 6 countries, and they found dog owners had a lowered risk of dying early by 24%. For those who already had a heart attack, the risk of dying was lowered by 31%. A major factor could be that pet owners who walk their dogs got up to 30 minutes of exercise a day. Studies also show petting dogs can reduce blood pressure, anxiety, and depression. Today in entertainment news, a Marvel star defends the franchise, a new look at an epic war movie, and a Beatles record sets a record. Here's David Daniel with the Hollywood Minute.
One screen legend answers another. Martin Scorsese made some waves when he told Empire magazine he didn't watch Marvel movies because, quote, that's not cinema, likening the blockbusters to theme parks instead. Samuel L. Jackson, who's been in 11 Marvel movies, dismissed Scorsese's comments, telling Variety films are films, and that not everyone likes Scorsese's movies either.
We need to keep moving! Come on! We can't possibly make it that way, man! You bloody insane!
There's action aplenty in the latest trailer for 1917. The World War I epic from director Sam Mendes about two young soldiers charged with getting a vital message through enemy lines. 1917 opens December 25th.
Come together right now over me.
This isn't a time warp. Abbey Road is #1 again. The Beatles classic tops the UK album chart 49 years and 252 days since its original reign atop the chart ended. That's the longest gap ever for an album between stints at #1. Paul McCartney tweeted, "It's hard to believe that Abbey Road still holds up after all these years, but then again, it's a bloody cool album." In Hollywood, I'm David Daniel.
And you can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thank you for joining us tonight. Have a great evening.